green light. Officially, thank you, Pastor. This is actually wide now.
Yes.
You can actually have some stuff spread out. And it's like for work, I work at home. I've got this giant 3-foot by 6-foot desk, and I use it all.
Mm-hmm.
So, when you got space, your junk goes and fills the available space. And for those that remember the last time I was up here, I got reminders on my tablet that will ping at 20 after, 40 after, and 10 till, so that I know, okay, speed it up, slow it down, get done, whatever. So, let's start with prayer. Dear Lord, we thank you for the day you've given us, Lord. We just thank you, Lord, for the blessings you have given us today, Lord. I pray that you'll be with me as I give this Sunday school lesson, Lord, that you'll guide and direct me. In your name, amen. Sometimes when you don't do this very often, it's really hard to figure out, okay, what am I going to speak about next? Because usually it's, I wait for something, maybe reading the Bible, or, something happens in my life. It's like, oh, that'd make a great lesson. So I was thinking, I want something a little bit more than just a one-time deal. Let's see, I got to make sure I'm nearsighted, but the glasses are meant for farsighted, so I got to be at a certain distance here so I can read everything. So I was trying to figure out, what would be a good series to do, and come to find out, I'm probably going to be doing Sunday school a whole lot more, so it's a good thing I found a series. At the time, I was going through Genesis, and I hit the section about Joseph. And I don't ever recall anybody, people have used him as an examples and such like that, but no one's ever really worked through the life of Joseph. I'm not going to exactly work through verse by verse on the life of Joseph, but there are many examples in the life of Joseph that you can look at and glean spiritual understanding from. Today, though, is just going to be entirely introduction. The whole Sunday school is just the introduction for the whole series. And the next time I speak, which a couple weeks, then I'll start going into the individual areas. But first off, God had a purpose for Joseph. And as many times, Pastor has said many times, especially through the whole coronavirus time and everything like that, none of this was a surprise. And everything that happened in Joseph's life wasn't a surprise to God. God knew that his brothers would throw him in a well, sell him off to their cousins, and they would sell him off to Potiphar in Egypt, and then he would be falsely accused. God knew it all. Knew exactly everything that was going to happen. And the thing is, Joseph didn't know that at that time. All he knew is there's things like some people, their lives are just like a string of bad luck. Bad things just happen. They're driving down the road, their car gets a flat, and while they're waiting for waiting for the tow truck, the tow truck gets in a wreck or something like that. Just bad things seems to happen to him. That was Joseph's life. But God had a purpose for that. Just because Joseph didn't understand it didn't mean that God wasn't in control. As Isaiah 55, get down there. Isaiah, there you are. 55:8. God is talking and it says, "For my thoughts are not your thoughts, neither are your ways my ways, saith the Lord. For as the heavens are higher than the earth, so are my ways higher than your ways, and my thoughts than your thoughts." Let's see. For as the rain cometh down and the snow from heaven, and returneth not thither, but watereth the earth, and maketh it bring forth and bud, that it may give seed to the sower and bread to the eater, so shall my word that goeth forth out of my mouth. It shall not return void unto me void, but it shall accomplish that which I please, and it shall prosper in the thing whereunto I sent it. So God knew everything that Joseph was going to go through. And Joseph, trying to figure out everything that was going to happen to him, he couldn't have comprehended it. As we say, we serve a big God. And, actually big is kind of is an understatement. What was it? Somebody was just saying that there was some spot where it says he holdeth like the belt of Orion in his hand. And somebody said, that star constellation is 17 light years across. A light year is somewhere over like around 1 trillion miles. So, he's holding that in his hand. So big doesn't really begin to describe. But as Isaiah says, God's ways are not our ways. What he thinks, his thoughts, are so far above us. For example, if we took Faith, 6 years old, if you can answer, she'll tell you, 6 years old. I take her home, she'll plop her right in front of my work computer and say, okay, do my job. She's not going to, one, I don't think she can get past the login screen. But if I did that, even if I did that, she wouldn't have the first clue what to do. Even if I told her what to do, she would have a hard time doing it because my thoughts and my ways of work, and I work on computers, stuff like that, are far above her right now. Just like that, God is so far above us on what he thinks and the way he plans things out. So that's what he did for Joseph. He knew this is the end goal that I need Joseph to be. So he's got this distance to make. So I've got to mature him. I've got to give him experience through the course of his life to meet my end goal. God knew what people would do to Joseph, good and bad, and he used it to mold and mature Joseph. As I just said, like Faith couldn't do my job. If Joseph, after his father gave him the coat of many colors, if the Pharaoh of Egypt would have happened by, and said, you know what, you're going to be second command. Joseph couldn't have done it. He wasn't prepared for that position at the time. If you go, look at Romans 9, it's a lengthy section. We won't go over it too much, go to it, but Romans 9, 14 to 23 shows the sovereignty of God. I set one up, I raise another one up for my purposes. Our current president is put in the office by God, and he's got a purpose for him to be there. We may not like it, but that's what it is. God, he's not there because God said, all of a sudden election night comes up and God's like, whoa, what happened here? God knew exactly what was going to happen. So every trial Joseph faced in his life, God moved the exact person and circumstances into place to meet his will. Everything, the betrayal, the going into Potiphar, working for Potiphar, being falsely accused by his wife, working in the jail, the butler and the chief butler and chief cook, and then meeting with Pharaoh. God moved all those circumstances at the exact time. Just realize this too. Remember, it said it was the butler forgot about Joseph for 2 years. If the butler had remembered immediately, Pharaoh didn't have his dreams for 2 more years. Yeah. Joseph might have been freed and gone home. And then probably the vast majority of the world over there would have died during the famine. Because it was, according to the Bible, it was really bad. So God moved each exact person and each exact circumstance at the exact time that it was needed. Joseph did not know God's purpose for his life. I mentioned this, it seemed like, Joseph seemed to have a string of, as we could say, bad luck or bad incidences in his life, just one after another. He couldn't seem, just when he seems to be getting ahead and things seem to be going decently, then another setback of some nature happens. But it doesn't explicitly say, but Joseph had to have faith in God, that God knew what he was doing. In Hebrews 11:1, it says, this is it talks about what faith is. Now, faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. This whole chapter is about people's faith. We call it, the Hall of Fame, the Hall of Faith of the Bible. And when it says here, hoped, it isn't like some kid saying, I hope I get, toy X for my birthday. This is, or like Andy will appreciate this. I hope my car will make it home while the engine is rattling and the tire's getting low, I'm hoping it makes it. No, this is a hope where you're looking forward to a sure event. It's going to happen. So you're just looking forward to it. And some people in Hebrews 11, they saw the result of their faith. They had faith, and they saw their faith rewarded. Noah in verse 7, Noah had faith that God said, hey, it's going to rain. And it's going to rain. The thing is, you read in there in Genesis, there was no rain at that time. It's like there was a mist. They said there was a mist that came up and watered the ground. So it didn't really rain. So Noah was like, rain, what's rain? And it says it's going to rain, and it's going to rain a lot. But Noah got to see that. His faith was rewarded. He built the ark, and they were saved. His faith was rewarded. Sarah was promised a child, and her faith was rewarded. She saw it in her lifetime. But some were not. Abraham never saw the great nation that they said his descendants were going to become. He just had faith in God that it was going to happen. When he passed away, there was Isaac, and there may have been, one of Isaac's kids. That was it. Great nation doesn't really count more than, 4 people, 5 people doesn't really count as a great nation. So, but he didn't see it. Joseph, at the end of his life, had faith that God would lead the children of Israel out of Egypt. And he gave commandments that, I want my bones, carried out with you and buried in the land that God will give you. Obviously, Joseph didn't live around to see that. But in all these cases, it started with the person having faith in God first. Then God moved and acted. If Joseph didn't have faith, I'm sure you've all seen people that have had a rough life, that especially if they're unsaved, but they're very angry and bitter about their life circumstances. If Joseph, I can't believe that if Joseph didn't have faith that God had a plan for his life, I would be very surprised if he didn't have the faith in God, if he would not have been a very angry and bitter person. Because, like I said, you got your brothers. It would be like Dana, committing identity theft. Dana's my brother. Committing identity theft with me and selling my house underneath of me and running up, huge amounts of debt in my name. That was, just same with Joseph. He got betrayed by his brothers and sold. And, if that's the type of situation Joseph went through, and, if he didn't have faith in God, it was a trying time nonetheless. But if you didn't have, God in your life and faith, you've got nothing to lean back to except the natural man. And the natural man is, the first thing you think of is, is vengeance to get wrong and to get back. And that, then the anger and bitterness that would go along with that. The next part is, one part of Joseph's trials was God testing Joseph. God knew the end, but as one TV series I watch said, the guy says, I pretty much know all the conversations I'm going into, but I know how the conversation is going to go, but I leave a little room for somebody to try and disappoint me. And the character didn't disappoint him. He didn't lie to him. He told him the truth. So God knows how we're going to act, but He wants to really see, if given the choice, will you obey? Will you stay true? Let's go over to, there's my 20-minute reminder, 5 minutes late. Let's go over to James 1. Verses 2 through 4. It says, "My brethren, count it all joy when you fall into divers temptations, knowing this, that the trying of your faith worketh patience. But let patience have her perfect work, that you may be perfect and entire, wanting nothing. Now, the temptations there, this one of the things I constantly mention on. One of our possible hindrances as we read the Bible today is we apply what we think the word definitions are to words now to our current to when it was written back in 1611. For example, the one that says as a Romans where it talks about the Christian having no being dead. Basically, how your works are dead or something like that. It's really actually means, or actually have no power. It means like your words have no force. So if you look at the definition of the word, it doesn't mean like dead, as in we think dead and dying, but means like no power. There's no power behind your testimony. In this case, temptations means a trial or proving. This is not the same as being tempted to sin. This is like testing to see if something is strong as it's said to be. It's like Bill gets a truck and somebody says, this thing can haul 20 tons. And Bill says, well, you know what? We're going to find out if this thing can haul 20 tons. And that's what he is. He's doing a test. He's giving it a trial to see if it actually will do what's been said. And this is exactly what happened to Abraham when he was commanded to sacrifice Isaac in Genesis 22. God wanted to see that Abraham had faith in God and would believe God. That Abraham thought that Abraham's mind was, I'm going to sacrifice my son. He's going to be killed, but he's the son of promise. So he thought God was going to raise him up from the dead. But God, again does, as God does many times, we've got okay, these are the possible scenarios that we think this is how this is going to be answered. Our prayer is going to be answered, and God says, "No, I'm going to do this other thing way off here that you didn't even expect." The other part where it says diverse temptations, diverse means various colors, variegated, and I was like, variegated. I don't use that in my everyday language, so I had to look that up. And it says varied in appearance or color, marked with patches or spots of different colors. All of our trials in our lives that God can and does bring in, they're varied. They're different types. They could be financial, material, physical, medically, mentally, spiritually, relationships. There's just so many different types of trials that God can bring into our life. And just like there are many different colors, I went and looked this up. I was like, okay, Crayola. Went online. The biggest box of crayons that Crayola's offers is 120 crayons. How many different colors of blue are in there? But that's just like our trials. Our trials are going to be different. I mean, somebody may go through, oh, here we go. Chris, pastor's daughter, just drove up. If she had her car broke down, that would have been a black trial for her. If my car would have broke down on my driveway, that would have been a real mild thing. It's still the same thing. Cars broke down, but she's stuck in the middle of who knows where, and I'm at home with my potential mechanic, just like a 5-minute call away if I had to. So, but each... Thanks a lot. You knew what you were getting when you asked me to do this. But each trial and each variation of the trial is there for a specific purpose. God didn't God didn't all of a sudden say, whoa, what happened here? How did this happen? God knew it all. God, with whatever happened a couple weeks ago with our van, we snapped all the lug nuts off the one tire. God knew exactly what was going to happen. God knew that at this point, they're all going to snap off, the tire's going to fall down, and your wife's going to pull over, and there goes the rest of your Saturday afternoon. God knew all of that. So, side rabbit trail on that, as William has stated, God ordered the day. Amen. So there's really no point in if you get frustrated at your circumstances, you're getting frustrated with the person that ordered the day. Amen. And that's a dangerous position to try to get into. Amen. So Next point, when God calls somebody, God also equips. Joseph knew this eventually. In Genesis 50:20, it says, and this is after Jacob has died, and the brothers have come back and said, okay, Dad was the only restraining influence on Jacob, so now that Dad's gone, Joseph's going to, get his revenge on us. And they send the message off to Joseph, and Joseph replies back, part of it says, but as for you, you thought evil against me, but God meant it unto good, to bring to pass as it is this day, to save much people alive. God's end plan was for Joseph to be second in command of Egypt, to save, not just his family, but save much of the known world at that time. And everything that God sent into Joseph's life was to make him a just and forgiving ruler. If you've ever read like some of the remaining 5 years of the famine, what the people went through and such like that, I'll get into that a little bit later. But if Joseph had not been the right ruler, he could have still destroyed the land from his unrighteous actions. Many of Joseph's actions were decided years before. It's like in the book of Daniel, where they purposed, the Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego and Daniel, they purposed in their heart not to defile themselves with the king's meat. They had already decided what they were going to do. In Joseph's actions were, if you have to really look at some of this, but they are defined what he did, the way he acted earlier in his life bore out, later in his life. The same decisions, the same actions are being done. What you do in the small, you will do in the large. The one thing that always comes to mind, I use this quite often down in Kings Kids as an example, because it's something most of us do every day: driving. If you are an impatient driver, let's say you come up on somebody that, I'm sure if you drive the speed limit on M82, you've experienced it. I turn out, when I get ready to turn on M82, I look, and if there's a car like 3/4 of a mile down coming, I typically wait. Because if I pull out, within a half mile, they're going to be on my bumper. You come up on somebody that's driving the speed limit. Do you, as we say, ride their bumper? Do you drive recklessly and aggressively to get around them? Does it seem like everybody on the road is just in your way? You're just trying to get places, and everybody seems to just be stopping you. You're impatient. But what's going to happen to you when you pray to God for something, and God says, not now? Not no, not yes, but not now. What are you going to do? You can try and hurry God, but it always turns out bad. Israel is still paying today for Abraham hurrying God. Where do you think most of the Arabs come from? They're descendants of Ishmael. And Ishmael was Abraham and Sarah trying to hurry God on doing things. So if I'm not saying that, if you're an impatient driver, that, take everything in moderation, a grain of salt, and don't take my illustrations and twist them. Tithing. I had one of my friends, his unsaved father, said one time, he says, you know what? When I get a lot of money, I'm going to start giving to the church. And his other unsaved friend just laughed at him right there. Just out and out, just laughed right in his face. And said, you don't even give money to the church now. There's no way in the world you get a lot of money, you're going to give anything to the church. Let's see. And these are one of the things that, if you're ever doing, have to do teaching lessons or something like that, Pastor probably left because he thought, there's something that I just thought of or something like that, I need to add to my sermon today. He does that often. There have been a number of times. I know it's happened with Don. I know it's happened with William several times. I know I'm coming up. I'm going to be doing a Sunday school lesson, and Don or William are teaching, and I was like, "Oh yeah, I can use that." I mean, there was one time I started out with like maybe three main points for my Sunday school lesson, and by the time Don was done with the Sunday school lesson, I had like 4 more. Don basically gave me the rest of my main points for Sunday school lesson. So paying attention during the services, it helps. I mean, it's not just there for your edification, but you can use it later on. Let's see here. Let's turn over to Luke 19 or Luke 16. This is one of those that William has worked through on his lessons from Christ. 16:10. This is in reference to the unjust steward and having to give the account. But the verse there, says, "He that is faithful in what is least is faithful also in much, and he that is unjust in the least is also unjust in much. If therefore you have not been faithful in the unrighteous mammon, who will commit to your trust the true riches?" As I said, as you do in the small, you do in the large. If you can't be trusted to, if God gives you, you find $5 alongside the road, well, that's tithable money. You should, that says 10% plus the offering. So, you do, that's, if you say that's just $5. But once you say, okay, I'm going to justify it in the small that, okay, this is such a big, small thing. So what happens when you get a bonus to work of $500? Oh, I can use all of that to go do this, maybe pay off or buy this motorcycle, jet ski, whatever. Maybe I'll use it to fix my car. But if I tithe, I won't be able to do that. The pastor that we used to have when I was a teenager, when he took up the church, they said, we can pay you $35 a week. And he tithed on that. He gave $5 a week to the church. That was his tithe and offering. And at the same time, all 5 of his kids were in a Christian school, and he never missed a payment. I guarantee you that wasn't, and he didn't work I don't think he worked a second-time job. God provided because he was faithful in the small, in the least. Let's see. And also, let's go over to Luke 19. This is one of the parables, verse 17, but this is one of the parables of the ruler, the nobleman that went away, and he gave his servants money and said, "Occupy until I come." And when he comes back, he comes to the first servant, and he says, "You gave me 10 pounds, and I have gained 10 more pounds beside that." And in verse 17, and the nobleman, and he said unto him, "Well, thou good servant, because thou hast been faithful in very little," it's like, okay, you got $10 and you gained $10 more. So you've been faithful in very little, have thou authority over 10 cities. Like, okay, that's quite a big jump to be, but he'd already proven that he could be faithful in the small and the little stuff. Then God, the nobleman, knew he could be faithful in the big stuff. And same thing happened with the second. Thy pound hath gave 5 pounds. And he said unto him, likewise, be thou over 5 cities. He didn't get the same reward as the first one, but he still was rewarded because he was faithful over the little that he had. And God said, okay, you're not quite as adept as the first one, but you're still faithful, so here's your reward of being the large. Next, Joseph learned from all of his experiences and trials in his life. I'm sure all of you, some of you have had pets that would not listen for nothing, and that's why they invented shock collars. Because it's like, I can't get to you to discipline the animal, so I can do it wirelessly and get you. And it's the same thing why they have bit and bridles for a horse. because not every horse is going to obey, your command. I mean, I've heard stories of some horses, they could be, a gentle little pressure on the right side, and the horse goes one direction, a little pressure on the left side, he goes the other way, and the horse is well behaved and obedient, but not all animals are like that, and neither are we. There's my 40-minute notice, 10 minutes. We can do this. There are times that, as has been said, God pulls out the metaphorical 2x4, whacks us upside the head. We get up and still keep going, and then God has to whack us again and hit us in the knees and take us down, and then you're still on the ground, you're still trying to crawl and go in the direction you're not supposed to, and God's like, come on, get it through your thick skull. I'm trying to help you here. I'm trying to stop you from doing something stupid. And as Pastor said, you're going to pretty much do what you want to do. And, but in the end, you may still regret it. But one of the examples we have of Joseph learning was the example of Joseph learned how to work hard under a difficult boss from his father. I'll get into it more probably in other lessons, but Laban was not a righteous man. Actually, from the way I read it, it sounded he was a very greedy man. And Jacob had to work for this guy for 20 years. He worked for him for 14 years for his 2 wives, and then 6 more years after that just to, get a stake and, get his household established. But Joseph had that example of his father working hard underneath, and sometimes in a very unreasonable man. But you look how Joseph acted when he worked for Potiphar, or how he worked for the jailer, and how he worked as the second command of Egypt. Potiphar, he was a slave in Potiphar's household. And as a jailer, not only was he a slave, he was a convicted, essentially in our day and term, a convicted felon in jail. But he still worked and was given top positions because of his faithfulness and hard work. Joseph saw what greed did to his uncle Laban. If you read through, you see that Laban's son said, all of our inheritance has gone to Jacob. And Jacob said, if God, I think it's in Genesis 31, Jacob has said, if God hadn't protected me, I would be left with nothing. Laban would have stole everything I had. So he saw the example of what greed can do to somebody. Now, can you imagine if he hadn't learned that lesson when it came to selling to the grain during the lean years? I mean, that is really, for those that are going to watch this, on the internet, who knows, 3 years down the road and everything's stabilized. Lumber prices right now in our day and age are insane. I think somebody was needing to grab a piece of plywood, and it was like $90 some odd when it used to be like 13. Yeah. So somebody is really gouging right now on the situation is dire. There's limited resources, so we're just going to raise the prices way high. And that's just wood nowadays. Joseph's time during the famine, this was food. This is you can probably live without a piece of plywood, but I'm sorry, I want my Cheerios in the morning. So you need food. So he could have really gouged and raised the prices on everything and just taken it all, and people would have paid. Because it was either that or starve. I mean, it says that the famine was just bad. Nothing was growing. I mean, there was nothing. But, you read in Genesis 47, Joseph worked a fair deal with the people. First off, he gathered all the money of the land. And the next year, people came to him and said, you know where we're at. We have no money. We've given you all of our money. We have nothing left. And it says, okay, I will buy your cattle you can trade your cattle for grain. And they did that. And all the cattle, he got all the cattle of the land, all the livestock of the land. Then they came back the next year and they said, we got no money, we got no cows, we got no livestock. What do we do now? And Joseph said, okay, I'll buy up all the land in Egypt except for the priests. I'll buy up all the land and you will work the land, but you will give a fifth of it back to Pharaoh. Because you're renting the land. Now the thing is too is, I guarantee you one of the main concerns of these people was, he's going to sell us into slavery. Slavery was common in this time. I mean, it was expected. You couldn't pay your debt to the slave auction. Get your money back. But you know what? Joseph had been a slave. He knew what that was like. I mean, granted, his circumstances were slightly better, but, he saw what's happened to slaves. He knew what they would go through. And he worked a deal, he worked it out so that people didn't have to go into slavery. I mean, they didn't own their land, but they were still free people. Joseph had to learn from good and bad experiences. Now, we rarely seem to learn from our own good experiences. Never mind good experiences of somebody else. Why is that? Because good experiences don't hurt. Our natural man thinks when something good happens to us that this is the way things should be. If man truly learned from good experiences, there would be a lot more wealthy people that are saved. Yeah. Because, let's pull a name out. Bill Gates, billions upon billions. He's had a lot of good experiences, material-wise. God has blessed him with lots of money, but not with spiritual need for his salvation. But because people, especially wealthy, but even us, because we don't have a physical need, we think we're fine. That's where another one of William's lessons from Christ about the rich fool that his land brought forth abundantly. And he said, what am I going to do? He says, I know. I'll tear down my, it's kind of like that point where, I imagine the people too were like, oh, I know who he's talking about. They had somebody right in their mind, says, I know who he's talking about. He says, I have all this now material possessions. What am I going to do? I'm going to keep it all for myself. I'm not going to help anybody else. I'm going to tear down my barns and I'm going to, store it all away and I'm going to live the life of luxury. So he had a good experience, but he didn't learn from it. He didn't learn where it came from. Bad experiences, they teach us because they hurt, man. In Ephesians 5:29, where it's talking about the husband loving the wife as himself, it says because no man hateth his own flesh, but he nourisheth it and cherisheth it. It's going to be warm today. We've got air conditioning on. We like our temperatures within a very narrow range of what we think is comfortable. And if we're a little bit uncomfortable, we do what we have to do to get comfortable. So when there's pain or anything like physical pain, we instinctively pull back. How many of us hold our hands in the flame on the burner or the stove? Just hold it there. Just hold it. Oh, that's getting burnt. That's getting hot. That really hurts, man. Before you even say ouch, your hand is already back. Yeah. So, bad experiences, we learn faster from them because they hurt, whether spiritually or physically. But even bad experiences, it's still difficult for us to learn from others' mistakes because we are so eye-focused. Again, Pastor Walters into Morley, Hiddle's saying, he says, everyone thinks they're the exception to the rule. Everybody thinks it's not going to happen to me. And you know what? It may, not for a little while. But sooner or later, you see somebody, I tell my kids, for driving, I point out aggressive drivers, said, that person's driving that way. And they're going to be all shocked and surprised when all of a sudden they can either get pulled over or get in an accident. Well, it's like, the way you're driving, your bad driving habits, it's just going to happen sooner or later. The problem is, since it didn't happen to us, we don't take a lot of times we don't take the lesson to heart. So, What time is it? Oh, yes, right on time. So that's the introduction to the lessons on the life of Joseph. So let's pray. Dear Lord, we thank you for this day, Lord. We thank you, Lord, for the life of Joseph, Lord, the many things that we can learn from him, Lord. I pray, Lord, you be with the upcoming services, Lord, that you will just guide and direct there. In your name, amen.